What's up guys, Yes McGann here, and it's been quite a while since my last guide, but whenever this god came out, I knew I would eventually give in and make a guide for him because I enjoy playing this god, and last patch he didn't get nerfed, surprisingly enough, when all the other warriors that are really strong right now did get nerfed, so I decided, you know what, this is the time to make a guide for the Hound of Ulster, Chulainn. Now, where do we start with this god? So he doesn't use any mana, he has massive damage, he has 2 forms, and he's probably one of the best gods to carry your ranked games from the solo lane. Well, I guess if we're already going over some of his strengths, we might as well just start off with the pros and cons. So his first major strength we already mentioned, and it just goes along with his kit, and it's the fact that he doesn't use mana. Instead, he uses a different resource called Rage, which allows him to basically use his abilities for free as long as he's hitting minions, and if he stays above the 85 Rage threshold for at least 3 seconds, he is able to rage out and become a massive beast and just create all kinds of nonsense in fights. He also has a relatively long melee range by default, so think Bellona's Scourge, but all the time. This is actually very useful in lane, especially when paired with his one that stuns minions, as well as it allows you to chase down enemies a lot more effectively in team fights, as well as if you're just on a chase in a 1v1. He also has incredibly high AoE and incidental damage, especially in the early to mid-game team fights. It makes it so squishies can't even stand next to you in fights. This, along with his ability to initiate as well as disrupt a lot in team fights, allows him to not only snowball incredibly hard, but also be relevant throughout the entire game. Of course, being a warrior, he does have a very versatile build as well, and he has a bit of inbuilt anti-healing to deal with those pesky healers and give him a little more utility in his non-berserk form. As you can see, he has a lot of strengths, but he does have a few weaknesses to make sure he doesn't completely break the game. His first obvious weakness is that he has no natural sustain. This is something that is remedied a bit by his build, but you do have to keep it in mind, especially early game, that you're not going to be having a death toll or something to keep you sustained, so you have to be careful and make sure to rely on your pots. And although he doesn't have to use mana, which is pretty great in itself, he does have to worry about his new resource Rage, as it does require some management and can take a little bit to get used to, but once you have it mastered, it's not too difficult to deal with, but it is something you always have to keep in mind. He also tends to feel clunky and buggy, especially in his berserk form, but it's something that gets improved from patch to patch, but it can still be a nuisance. And lastly, similar to other warriors who focus on using abilities to clear the wave, he doesn't have the best time against the Death Toll warriors such as Bellona and Osiris early on in the game. Now that we're done going through Chulainn's pros and cons, we can now get into his items. So at the beginning of the game, I almost exclusively go Bluestone, Boots 1, a Health Chalice, and 2 Health Pots. This is what I determined to be the most effective way to play him early on in the game. After just trying out a lot of different things, this works the best with his level power spikes as well as his early game. It allows him to get a bit of better early clear as well as having better sustain, but I did leave multi-pots in the equation just in case you don't want to go for the Health Chalice because I know a lot of people don't prefer that option. But I'm saying Health Chalice and Health Pots are really strong together, and it's even better on this god just because of the extra sustain, not needing the mana and everything, so keep that in mind. But like I said, I know a lot of you guys don't like Health Chalice, so multi-pots, still a viable option. Now getting into the core items, if you remember my Things to Know Chulainn video whenever this god first came out, there were 2 items that I spoke about in great detail. That was Gladiator Shield and Mystical Mail. And through playing him a lot, that really hasn't changed too much. I will admit that Mystical Mail does depend on your situation and whether you're behind or ahead, and who you're laning against, but Gladiator Shield I pick up almost every single game. The stats alone are great on almost every single warrior in the game, but what makes it for this god is the passive. Like I said, this god doesn't have any natural sustain in his kit, so once you're able to get a Gladiator Shield online and you're making every single ability you have heal you, yeah, you're gonna be doing a lot in staying alive in team fights, as you have massive AoE damage from your 1, 2, 3, and ultimate in both forms, so you're getting extra abilities as well as hitting multiple targets with all your abilities, allowing you to get a lot of sustain and survive in team fights. So not only the stats, but also the passive. But even though Gladiator Shield is a great item on this god, there are still other items that may be better in the situation that you're in. So things like Pestilence and Genji's Guard, of course, against magical gods. You get Genji's Guard against gods who don't have sustain. Pestilence, if they have a lot of sustain, you have to deal with. And then also you can go Height of the Urchin against a lot of Guardians if you want to get those protections online early. An incredibly strong item that should never be underestimated, as well as Breastplate of Valor. Although a lot of the cost is in mana, it's still a very effective item and can be picked up on this god maybe if you fell really far behind and you want the extra protections and cooldown reduction for the next team fight. And as always, I listed a few offensive as well as defensive items that I like to pick up depending on the situation. Offensive items are usually only picked up if you're ahead and you just want to do some extra damage, or you want a bit more utility from something like Brawler's Beatstick or Frostbound Hammer. And then the defensive items, it all depends on what you're playing against. If they have a lot of slows, Wingblade's really good. If they have a big crit hunter, you like Nemean Lion, Midgardian Mail's good as well. And of course, both of the robed items are very good in that spot also. The example build starts the way you would expect, followed up by a Hide of the Urchin, Mantle of Discord, as well as Masamune. 3 items that I think are very strong as they provide both physical as well as magical protections, and a lot of them. And the passive effects that they provide are really strong as well. Not something you're going to go to every single game, but these are items that I recommend picking up if you do have the opportunity to. Now, relics will greatly change the way you play this god in teamfights as well as even early on in the game. For me, Shell and Sprint is the option that I go to most of the time. It's very safe. Shell, of course, is very strong early on in lane. It allows you to stay alive, as well as it allows you to maybe go for a spicy dive or something early on in the game, and it's very useful in teamfights as well. Same thing with Sprint. You may have to get it early, but it's generally a second relic that I like to pick up, just because the movement speed's very useful, and the slow immunity is pretty much always strong against most gods, so look to get those relics in most situations. But although those relics are very consistent, there are 2 other options that I like to pick up to make the big plays. Those relics are Blink and Horrific Emblem for 2 very different reasons. Blink is great for the initiation. You can blink into an enemy team, use Spear of Mortal Pain, and instantly have a huge advantage on that team fight. Horrific Emblem, however, is great for 2 reasons. It's good in team fights to follow up the initial initiation from your Guardian or something, as well as it's great in lane for getting an early kill, as whenever you hit level 2 with this god, you do have the opportunity to rage out, and usually you will rage out at this point, and it's very, very, very strong for picking up kills in that situation. However, it is not good against gods who have the early advantage against you in lane and will probably have you pretty low, and gods who can escape the Horrific Emblem pretty easily. Now that we went over how to build Chulainn, and you know where he falls short as well as where he excels, we can get into the tips and tricks. So the first tip has to do with the laning phase, and that's to take short trades after using Barb Spear, your first ability. One of its benefits is that it stuns minions, allowing you to have a short window where you're able to damage the enemy and not take any extra damage from archers, especially in the early game stages. This can lead to an overall health advantage in the lane, especially against gods who don't use Death's Toll or don't have any natural sustain. And this health advantage is incredibly useful at level 2 and 5. Chulainn gains massive kill potential at these levels, with level 2 being the first time he goes berserk and level 5 allowing him to have 2 ultimates, both cases greatly increasing his damage and allowing for some surprise kills against your lane opponent. But of course, you could never reach the berserk threshold if you didn't have the third ability, Salmon's Leap. Similar to Kamaza's Devour, this ability is a relatively short but quick leap that can be used to dodge abilities. This is especially useful in lane against gods like Bologna, who have a very heavy hitting ability that will really mess up your laning phase. I also find it very useful to try and use all your abilities while you're in berserk form, because the next time you go berserk, all your abilities are going to be off cooldown anyway, so if you have the chance to clear the wave or something and you have your ultimate available in berserk form, you might as well just use it there so you can at least get some use out of it, as well as clear the wave a bit quicker. But before you go berserk, it's very important to get your ultimate Spear of Mortal Pain off, because it's a very large ability that does a lot of damage and has a really nice CC on it. Because once you go berserk, you're probably not going to be in the team fight by the time berserk ends, as it's 20 seconds and team fights generally don't last that long. So you want to get as much damage off as possible and use that before you go berserk. This ultimate is incredibly strong in teamfights, but it's also very strong at stopping dashes, especially ones with CC connected to them such as Apollo's. This puts the enemy in a very precarious situation, allowing for your team to capitalize on their lack of mobility, as well as allowing you to get a bit of free damage off on them. It's also a cheeky way of bullying gods such as Erlong Shen and Vamana. Now for Leveling Order, I've tried many different things, including leveling Vent Anger over the ultimate Spear of Mortal Pain, as well as leveling the 3 Salmon's Leap last, but I've pretty much settled on what I like to do now. And that is leveling Barb Spear first, then the ultimate Spear of Mortal Pain, followed by the third ability, Salmon's Leap, and then lastly, Vent Anger. I find Vent Anger to be useful, but overall, I just like the extra damage from Salmon's Leap, as I don't have to use extra mana, of course, by leveling it up, so it's not really an issue on Chulainn, as well as it does a lot of extra damage per level. So that just about wraps up my Chulainn guide, a god that I think is very strong right now, as well as incredibly fun to play, but does require a little bit of practice and mastering in order to reach his full potential. So I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot from this, and as always, this has been the SM again with another build guide, only the second one of the season, but hey, I make them when I make them. and I felt like making one today, and this god's going to be pretty strong until he gets nerfed. We'll see next patch if he gets nerfed, but for now, he's still definitely a really strong god to have in your arsenal. So please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.